The afternoon sun blazes mercilessly as dust devils dance across the horizon, but inside the saloon, Jake Sullivan's hand trembles against his whiskey glass, not from the heat, but from the poster bearing his face that just walked through the swinging doors. The bounty hunter's spurs jingle like death bells as he approaches the bar, and Jake knows his 3 months of peace in Copper Ridge are about to shatter like glass. He's been running for 2 years, sleeping with one eye open, trusting no one, but now the thought of leaving this place, leaving her, feels like dying all over again. Outside, the schoolhouse bell chimes the end of another day, and Miss Catherine Walsh steps onto the wooden walkway, her auburn hair catching sunlight like autumn leaves. She doesn't know the man who helped fix her schoolhouse roof last week is worth $5,000, dead or alive. She doesn't know that the gentle hands that carved wooden letters for her students once drew faster than lightning. All she knows is that for the first time since her husband died, she feels something stirring in her chest that isn't grief. Jake downs his whiskey and stands, his decision already made. He won't run this time, no matter what it costs him. Jake Sullivan stands 6 feet tall with shoulders broadened by years of hard living and harder choices. His weathered hands tell stories of rope burns and gunpowder, while his brown eyes hold depths that speak of sleepless nights and decisions that can't be undone. At 32, he carries himself with the cautious grace of a man who's learned that survival means never fully relaxing, never completely trusting. The scar running from his left temple to his jaw serves as a permanent reminder of the night everything went wrong, the night he killed a man in what he swears was self-defense, though the wanted poster tells a different story. 6 months ago, Jake lost the only family he had left when his younger brother Tommy died of consumption in a Denver boarding house. Tommy had been the one good thing Jake was fighting for, the reason he kept moving, kept hoping that someday they'd find a place to settle down and start over. With Tommy gone, Jake had been ready to give up, to let the next bounty hunter take his due, until he stumbled into Copper Ridge with a fever and a bullet wound that wouldn't heal. The town sits nestled in a valley where the Colorado Territory meets the mountains, a place where settlers come to disappear from whatever they're running from. The main street stretches between wooden storefronts painted in faded blues and greens, weathered by wind and blessed by mountain streams that keep the land green enough for hope. Jake found work as a handyman, his quick draw holstered but his steady hands perfect for mending what's broken. Every morning, he watches the sun paint the peaks gold and rose, and every evening he sits on the porch of Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, listening to the sound of children's laughter drifting from the schoolyard. It's the first place he's ever wanted to stay, the first place that feels like the word home might mean something. The boarding house where Jake stays smells of lavender and fresh bread, run by a widow named Margaret Henderson, who asks no questions about a man's past and judges him only by whether he pays his rent on time and treats others with respect. She's become something like a mother to him, the first person in years to look at him and see possibility instead of danger. Jake's days begin before dawn, when he walks the perimeter of town, not from habit but from genuine concern for its safety. He fixes broken fence posts for the Methodist minister, repairs the schoolhouse steps where children's feet have worn the wood smooth, and helps stock shelves at Patterson's general store. The work is honest and humble, and for the first time in his adult life, he feels pride in his labor instead of shame in his survival. In the evenings, he joins the other men for checkers and coffee, listening to their stories of failed crops and successful harvests, of letters from back east and plans for expansion. They've accepted him with the casual friendship of men who understand that everyone has a past and most have good reason for leaving it behind. The schoolhouse stands at the east end of town, a simple wooden structure with tall windows that catch the morning light and cast long shadows across rows of hand-carved desks. Catherine Walsh has been its teacher for 3 years, ever since she arrived from Boston carrying nothing but her teaching certificate and a heart full of determination to start over. She's 28, with auburn hair that refuses to stay completely pinned and green eyes that flash with intelligence and humor. Her hands are always stained with chalk or ink, and her practical dresses are often wrinkled from kneeling beside struggling students or climbing on chairs to hang educational charts. She speaks with the educated accent of New England, but has learned to appreciate the straightforward honesty of frontier conversation. Catherine's husband died of pneumonia during their second winter in Boston, leaving her with debts she couldn't pay and a family who expected her to move back home and remarry quickly. Instead, she responded to an advertisement for a teacher in Colorado Territory, seeking the kind of independence that wasn't possible in her previous life. Her students range from 6-year-old Mary Patterson, who still struggles with her letters, to 16-year-old Samuel Morrison, who helps her with the younger children and dreams of becoming a lawyer. Catherine sees potential in every face, believes education can transform not just individuals but entire communities. She's fought the school board for supplies, organized fundraisers for books, and personally visits the homes of children who stop attending to convince their parents that learning matters. 3 weeks ago, when a spring storm damaged the schoolhouse roof and threatened to cancel classes indefinitely, Catherine stood in the rain trying to nail wooden shingles while balancing on a ladder. That's when Jake appeared, seemingly from nowhere, his tool belt already around his waist and his movements efficient and sure. "Miss Walsh," he'd said, his voice low and respectful, "let me handle that before you fall and give the children a real lesson in gravity." She'd climbed down, embarrassed but grateful, and watched him work with the focused precision of someone who understood that details matter. When he finished, the roof was stronger than it had been before the storm, and when she tried to pay him, he'd simply tipped his hat and said that education was too important to let a few loose shingles get in the way. The next morning, she found a set of wooden alphabet blocks on her desk, each letter carved with remarkable detail and sanded smooth as silk. No note, no explanation, but she knew they'd come from the quiet man with gentle hands and careful eyes. The Golden Eagle Saloon serves as Copper Ridge's unofficial community center, where merchants discuss supply routes and ranchers debate cattle prices over beer and whiskey. Jake sits at his usual table in the corner, positioned where he can see both the front door and the back exit, a habit ingrained by years of never knowing when trouble might walk in. Today, Trouble wears a badge and carries a rifle across his saddle. Deputy Marshal William Cross rides into town with the confidence of a man who's never met a problem he couldn't solve with either legal authority or well-placed bullets. He's been tracking Jake for 3 months, following a trail of small kindnesses and repair work that the fugitive probably never realized he was leaving. Cross dismounts in front of the saloon, his boots hitting the wooden walkway with deliberate heaviness. He's a lean man in his 40s, gray-bearded and sharp-eyed, the kind of lawman who believes justice and the law are the same thing. The wanted poster in his saddlebag offers $5,000 for Jake Sullivan, dead or alive, for the murder of Clayton Ross in a Denver gambling house 2 years ago. What the poster doesn't mention is that Clayton Ross was a corrupt city councilman who'd been systematically cheating homesteaders out of their land claims. What it doesn't say is that Ross drew first when Jake confronted him about forged documents that would have stolen a widow's farm. The legal system saw only a drifter's word against a respected politician's reputation, and Jake became a fugitive rather than wait for a trial he was certain he'd lose. Inside the saloon, conversations quiet as Cross approaches the bar. Barkeeper Tom Morrison, Samuel's father, polishes glasses with studied indifference, but his eyes dart toward Jake's corner table. "Looking for someone?" Tom asks, his tone carefully neutral. Cross pulls out the wanted poster and spreads it on the bar. Jake's face stares back from the yellowed paper, younger but unmistakably the same man who spent the last 3 months earning the town's respect through honest work and quiet kindness. "Name's Jake Sullivan," Cross says, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "wanted for murder. $5,000 reward." He looks around the saloon slowly, studying each face. Anybody seen this man? The silence stretches long enough for Jake to finish his whiskey and consider his options. He could slip out the back, be gone before Cross knew he was ever here. His horse is saddled and ready, old habits die hard. But leaving would mean never seeing Catherine again, never knowing if the feelings growing between them might have led somewhere worth staying for. Tom Morrison sets down his glass and meets Cross's stare directly. "Deputy, we get a lot of drifters through here, hard to remember every face." Cross nods slowly, unconvinced but not ready to push. "I'll be staying at the hotel tonight. If anyone's memory improves, there's good money in speaking up." As Cross exits, Jake feels the weight of every eye in the saloon. These men have shared coffee with him, trusted him with their tools, invited him into their homes. Now they know he's been living a lie, and he has no idea what they'll choose to do with that knowledge. Outside, the schoolhouse bell rings, signaling the end of another day. Through the window, Jake watches Catherine emerge from the building, her arms full of books and papers. She pauses to speak with young Mary Patterson, kneeling to the child's level with the patience of someone who genuinely loves her work. Jake makes his decision. Whatever happens next, he won't run without telling her the truth. The evening air carries the scent of wood smoke and cooking supper as Jake walks toward the schoolhouse. Catherine is inside, cleaning the blackboard and organizing tomorrow's lessons. Lamplight spills through the windows, creating golden rectangles on the dusty ground. He knocks softly on the doorframe, and she looks up with a smile that makes his chest tight with emotion he's not sure he deserves to feel. "Mr. Sullivan," she says, setting down her chalk, "have you come to check your roof repair? I can assure you it's held perfectly through every storm." "Miss Walsh," he begins, then stops, unsure how to explain what he needs to say. "I need to tell you something. About who I am." Something in his tone makes her smile fade. She moves closer, her green eyes searching his face with the same careful attention she gives to her students when they're struggling with a difficult lesson. "I know who you are," she says quietly. "You're the man who fixed my roof without being asked. You're the one who carved alphabet blocks so beautiful I almost cried. You're the person who helped Samuel Morrison with his mathematics when he was too proud to ask for help." "No," Jake says, his voice rough with emotion, "you know who I've been pretending to be. But there's things about my past. Everyone has a past, Jake." She steps closer, close enough that he can smell the faint scent of lavender in her hair. "What matters is who you choose to be now." Before he can explain about the wanted poster, about Deputy Cross, about the $5,000 on his head, the schoolhouse door opens again. Samuel Morrison enters, his young face flushed with excitement. "Miss Walsh," he says breathlessly, "my PA sent me to tell you, there's a lawman in town looking for." He stops abruptly when he sees Jake, his eyes widening with understanding. "Looking for me," Jake finishes gently. "I know, son." Catherine's hand goes to her throat, and Jake sees the exact moment when understanding crashes over her like cold water. The danger, the implications, the impossibility of their situation, it all becomes real in her widening eyes. "What did you do?" she whispers. Jake looks at Samuel, then back at Catherine. "I killed a man in Denver 2 years ago. The law says it was murder, but he drew on me first. I was trying to help a widow keep her farm, and he was stealing it legal-like, with forged papers." Samuel steps closer, his teenage mind grappling with the complexity of right and wrong. "So you were helping someone." "Doesn't matter what I thought I was doing," Jake says. "What matters is there's a bounty on my head, and Deputy Cross is here to collect it." Catherine sinks into one of the student chairs, her hands trembling. "How long have you known he was coming?" "I saw him ride into town this afternoon. I could have run, should have run. But I couldn't leave without telling you the truth." The silence stretches between them, filled with the weight of impossible choices. Outside, the sounds of evening continue, horses moving through the street, voices calling goodnight, the normal rhythms of a peaceful town that's about to be disrupted. "What will you do?" Catherine asks finally. Jake kneels beside her chair, his eyes level with hers. "I don't know. I've been running for 2 years, never staying anywhere long enough to matter. But this place," he gestures around the schoolhouse, then looks directly at her. "You've made me want to stop running." Samuel clears his throat. "Miss Walsh, my PA says the town council's meeting tonight." About the stranger asking questions, Catherine stands abruptly, her teacher's mind already working through possibilities. "They're deciding whether to turn you in." Jake nods. "It's $5,000, Catherine. That's more money than most of these folks will see in 5 years. I can't ask them to pass that up for a man they've known 3 months. But you're not just any man," she says fiercely. "You've helped everyone in this town. You've proven who you are by your actions." "I'm a wanted killer," Jake says simply. "That's what the law says, and that's what matters." The schoolhouse door opens again, and Tom Morrison enters, his face grave. Behind him come 3 other men, Minister Paul Henderson, storekeeper George Patterson, and rancher David Walsh, Catherine's distant cousin, who helped her get the teaching position. "Jake," Tom says, his voice heavy with reluctance. "We need to talk." Jake stands slowly, his hand instinctively moving toward his hip before he remembers he's not wearing his gun belt. "I suppose you do." Minister Henderson steps forward, a man whose white hair and gentle manner hide a core of steel forged by 30 years of frontier preaching. "Son, we know about the poster. Deputy Cross made sure everyone in town saw it. The town council met," George Patterson adds. He's a stocky man with kind eyes who's always treated Jake with fairness. "We voted." Jake feels Catherine's hand slip into her fingers cold but steady. "And we voted to ask you to stay," Tom Morrison says. "Fight this thing legal-like. We'll help you get a lawyer, testify to your character." Jake stares at them, stunned. "You'd risk harboring a fugitive? For me? David Walsh speaks up, his resemblance to Catherine clear in his strong jaw and direct gaze. Jake, in 3 months you've done more good for this town than some folks manage in a lifetime. That counts for something. But the money don't mean much if we sell our souls to get it, Minister Henderson says firmly. We've seen who you are, son. That matters more than some poster. Catherine squeezes Jake's hand tighter. You don't have to run anymore. But even as hope begins to bloom in Jake's chest, the sound of approaching hoofbeats reminds them all that Deputy Cross hasn't given up his search. The lawman's voice carries clearly through the evening air as he questions people on the street, showing the wanted poster, offering reward money for information. He's getting closer, Samuel whispers. Jake makes his decision. He gently pulls his hand free from Catherine's and steps toward the men who've just offered him something he never expected: acceptance and protection. I'm grateful, he says, his voice thick with emotion. More grateful than you'll ever know, but I won't bring trouble to this town. I won't risk any of you getting hurt because of my past. Jake, no, Catherine says urgently. You can't keep running forever. Maybe not forever, he agrees. But I can run far enough to keep you safe. Before anyone can stop him, Jake moves toward the door, but Tom Morrison steps into his path, and the other men close ranks behind him. Son, the minister says gently, sometimes a man's got to stop running and trust that truth will win out. And sometimes truth don't matter as much as who's got the bigger gun, Jake replies. The sound of boots on the schoolhouse steps ends their debate. Deputy Cross appears in the doorway, his rifle held ready but not quite aimed. His eyes take in the scene, the gathered townsmen, the woman's frightened face, and finally settle on Jake with satisfaction. Jake Sullivan, Cross says formally. You're under arrest for the murder of Clayton Ross. You can come easy, or we can do this hard. Jake raises his hands slowly, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face. I'll come easy, deputy. No need for anyone else to get hurt. But as Cross steps forward with iron shackles, Tom Morrison moves to block his path. Now hold on, deputy, Tom says firmly. We'd like to see some documentation. Maybe talk to a lawyer. Cross's face hardens. This man's a wanted killer. I don't need permission from locals to do my job. Maybe not, says Minister Henderson stepping up beside Tom. But you're in our town now, we've got rights too. Rights don't override federal warrants. Cross snaps, but Jake can see uncertainty creeping into his manner. He'd expected to find a fugitive hiding among strangers, not a community willing to protect one of their own. George Patterson joins the growing line of men between Cross and Jake. Deputy, this man's been nothing but helpful since he arrived. Fixed half the buildings in town, helped our children with their learning. Maybe there's more to this story than your poster tells. The story's simple, Cross says, his voice rising. He killed a man in cold blood and ran. Now I'm taking him back to face justice. Whose justice? Catherine demands, surprising everyone including herself with the steel in her voice. The justice of men who've never seen what Jake has done here. Who've never watched him gentle a spooked horse or stay up all night helping a sick child. Cross turns his attention to her, his expression softening slightly. Ma'am, I understand you folks have gotten attached, but the law is the law. This man is dangerous. The only dangerous thing about Jake Sullivan, Samuel Morrison says, his young voice cracking with emotion, is how much good he's done that nobody wants to lose. Jake feels the weight of their protection like a physical force, these people who barely know him choosing to stand between him and capture. It's more than he's ever dared hope for, and it breaks something open in his chest that's been locked away for years. Please, he says quietly, addressing his protectors more than Deputy Cross. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but no, Catherine interrupts, stepping out from behind the line of men to face Cross directly. Deputy, before you take him away, I think you should know something about Clayton Ross. Cross frowns. What about him? I knew him, Catherine says, her voice gaining strength. In Boston, before I came here. He had business dealings with my late husband's family. Clayton Ross was a corrupt man who ruined good families for profit. That doesn't give anyone the right to kill him, Cross says, but his certainty is wavering. No, Catherine agrees, but it might give someone the right to defend themselves when he draws a gun. Cross studies her face, reading the conviction there. You weren't there, ma'am. You don't know what happened. I know Jake, she says simply. And I know Clayton Ross. If Jake killed him, it was because he had no choice. The deputy's hand tightens on his rifle, but Jake can see doubt creeping in. Cross is a lawman, but he's also a man who's seen enough of the world to know that legal doesn't always mean right. Even if that's true, Cross says finally, It's not my decision to make. I've got a warrant, and I've got a job to do. Jake steps forward, gently moving past his protectors. He's right. This isn't their fight. It is now, Tom Morrison says firmly. We've made it our fight. But before anyone can respond, the sharp crack of gunfire shatters the evening air. Everyone freezes as a voice calls out from the street. Deputy Cross, got your fugitive surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Cross's face goes pale. Bounty hunters, he mutters. I should have known. Through the window, they can see 3 armed men positioned around the schoolhouse, their rifles glinting in the lamplight. Jake recognizes the type, men who care nothing for law or justice, only for the reward money that dead or alive makes possible. This changes things, Cross says grimly. Those men don't care about bringing anyone back alive. Jake moves toward the window, assessing their situation. How many, deputy? 3 that I can see, maybe more. Cross looks at the townsmen, then at Catherine. I won't see innocent folks get hurt over this. Then let me go out there, Jake says. End this before anyone else gets involved. No, Catherine grabs his arm. They'll kill you the moment you step outside. Maybe Jake agrees, but they won't hurt any of you. Minister Henderson places a hand on Jake's shoulder. Son, there's got to be another way. But the decision is taken out of their hands when one of the bounty hunters fires a shot into the schoolhouse wall, sending splinters flying. Last chance, the voice calls. Send out Sullivan, or we come in shooting. Cross checks his rifle and moves toward the door. I'm still a federal deputy. Maybe I can reason with them. Deputy, Jake says quietly. Those men aren't interested in reason. They're interested in $5,000, and dead is easier than alive. Cross nods grimly. Then we'd better figure out how to keep everyone breathing. The standoff has begun, and Jake realizes that his 3 months of peace are about to cost the people he's come to love more than he ever imagined possible. The lamp flames flicker as another shot punches through the schoolhouse wall, and Jake can hear the bounty hunters moving closer. Catherine has gathered the men into the center of the room, away from the windows, her teacher's instincts for protecting others overriding her own fear. How long before they lose patience? Tom Morrison asks quietly. Not long, Cross answers, checking his ammunition. Men like that don't like to wait. Jake moves to the back window, studying the schoolyard and the line of trees beyond. There's a way out through the back, leads to the creek bed. You could all make it to town while I keep them busy. We're not leaving you, Catherine says firmly. Catherine, be reasonable. Those men will kill everyone in here just to make sure they get me. I won't have your blood on my hands. Before she can argue, Samuel Morrison speaks up from his position near the front window. Mr. Sullivan, there's something moving in the street. Looks like more people coming. They peer carefully through the windows and see lanterns bobbing in the darkness, townspeople emerging from their homes and businesses, moving toward the schoolhouse despite the obvious danger. What are they doing? Catherine whispers. Minister Henderson smiles grimly. What this community does best, taking care of its own. Margaret Henderson appears first, Jake's landlady carrying a lantern and a rolling pin like she's ready to take on all comers. Behind her come the families. The Pattersons with their children, the young couples who run the hotel, the elderly widow who sells eggs and milk, even Doc Whitman with his medical bag. This is madness, Cross mutters. They'll all get themselves killed. But Jake understands what's happening. He's watched this community for 3 months, seen how they rally around anyone in need. They're not approaching as a mob, they're coming as neighbors, as people who've decided that one of their own needs help. One of the bounty hunters shouts a warning, but the townspeople don't stop. They form a loose circle around the schoolhouse, their lanterns creating a ring of light that makes any shooting more difficult and witnesses unavoidable. From somewhere in the crowd, Jake hears Margaret Henderson's voice, clear and strong. Evening, gentlemen. Lovely night for a community gathering, don't you think? The absurdity of her polite tone in the middle of an armed standoff almost makes Jake laugh. These people are either the bravest or the most foolish he's ever known, maybe both. Deputy Cross opens the schoolhouse door carefully. Mrs. Henderson, you folks need to get back to safety. Safety? Margaret calls back. Deputy, we are safe, we're with our neighbors. One of the bounty hunters moves closer, his rifle raised. Lady, this ain't your business. We're taking Sullivan, and anyone who gets in the way will have to answer to all of us. Tom Morrison's voice calls from outside. Jake realizes the storekeeper has slipped out during the confusion and joined the crowd. The bounty hunter's confidence wavers as he looks around at the faces surrounding him. These aren't hardened gunfighters or desperate outlaws. They're ordinary people, families, children even. Shooting into a crowd like this would be massacre, and even the most hardened killer might hesitate. "This is crazy," the bounty hunter mutters to his companions. "We didn't sign up for this." But their leader, a scarred man with cold eyes, isn't deterred. $5,000 is $5,000. These folks will scatter when the shooting starts. Jake makes his decision. He can't let these people risk themselves for him any longer. Moving before anyone can stop him, he steps through the schoolhouse door into the ring of lantern light. "I'm Jake Sullivan," he calls out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "You want me? Here I am. Let these folks go home to their families." The scarred leader grins and raises his rifle. "Nothing personal, Sullivan. Just business." But before he can fire, Catherine appears beside Jake, having slipped out the back door during the commotion. "Wait," she calls to the bounty hunter. "Before you shoot, there's something you should know." "Catherine, no," Jake says desperately. "Get back inside." She ignores him, addressing the bounty hunters with the same calm authority she uses with her students. "The man you're here to kill has spent 3 months helping this community. He's fixed our buildings, taught our children, protected our families. Are you really going to murder someone like that for money?" "Ma'am," the leader says with mock politeness, "he's wanted for murder. That makes him a killer." "Then what does that make you?" Samuel Morrison calls from the crowd. The teenager has appeared at the edge of the circle, his young face set with determination. "You're here to kill a man for money. How's that different?" The bounty hunter's face hardens. "Shut your mouth, boy." "Samuel, get back," Jake orders, but the young man doesn't move. "No, sir," Samuel says, his voice cracking but steady. "You taught me that a man stands up for what's right. You said courage isn't about not being scared, it's about doing what needs doing even when you are scared." Jake feels his throat tighten with emotion. "Son, this isn't your fight." "Yes it is," Samuel replies. "You're my friend. That makes it my fight." The crowd murmurs agreement, and Jake realizes that something extraordinary is happening. These people aren't just protecting him, they're protecting the idea of him, the possibility that a man can change, that redemption is real, that community means something. Deputy Cross emerges from the schoolhouse, his badge catching the lantern light. "All right, everyone calm down. Let's talk this through." The scarred bounty hunter sneers. "Nothing to talk about, deputy. We got a legal right to that reward." Maybe Cross agrees, but you don't have a right to endanger innocent civilians. And you sure don't have a right to commit murder in front of witnesses. It ain't murder if he's wanted dead or alive. It is if I'm placing him under federal protection pending investigation of new evidence, Cross says firmly. Jake stares at the deputy in surprise. Cross meets his gaze and nods slightly, a lawman choosing justice over procedure. "What new evidence?" the bounty hunter demands. Catherine steps forward. "My testimony about Clayton Ross's character, my knowledge of his criminal activities in Boston, evidence that this wasn't murder but self-defense." The bounty hunter's confidence wavers. Legal complications mean delays, and delays mean other bounty hunters might claim the reward first. "That's convenient," he says, but his rifle lowers slightly. "It's the truth," Catherine replies simply. Minister Henderson's voice rises from the crowd, and we'll all swear to Jake Sullivan's character. "Every person here. Every one," Margaret Henderson agrees loudly. The murmur of agreement that ripples through the crowd is like a physical force. Jake has never felt anything like it, the weight of a community's trust, the power of people choosing to believe in the possibility of goodness. The bounty hunters exchange glances, their easy payday becoming complicated by lawyers and witnesses and federal procedures. The scarred leader spits in the dirt. "This ain't over, Sullivan," he growls. "That 5,000's still out there." "Maybe," Jake says quietly, "but it's not yours tonight." The 3 men mount their horses and ride out, disappearing into the darkness beyond the circle of lanterns. The crowd begins to disperse slowly, people patting Jake on the shoulder, speaking quiet words of support before heading home to their families. Deputy Cross approaches Jake carefully. "Son, I meant what I said about federal protection, but that's only temporary. You'll still need to face what happened in Denver." "I know," Jake says, "but maybe now I won't have to face it alone." Catherine takes his hand, her fingers warm and steady. "You definitely won't face it alone." Cross nods. "I'll send word to Denver, request a proper investigation. With new testimony and character witnesses, you might get a fair hearing. And if I don't, then you'll deal with that when it comes," Catherine says firmly. "But you'll deal with it here, with people who know who you really are. As the last of the townspeople disappear into the night, Jake stands in the schoolyard with Catherine's hand in his and realizes that for the first time in years, he's not planning his next escape route. He's not calculating distances to the nearest town or watching for approaching riders. He's home, the morning sun rises over Copper Ridge with the promise of a new day, and Jake Sullivan wakes for the first time in 2 years without immediately reaching for his gun. The events of the previous night feel like a dream. The community's protection, Deputy Cross's surprising support, Catherine's unwavering faith. But the sunlight streaming through his boarding house window proves it was all real. Margaret Henderson has breakfast waiting when he comes downstairs, eggs and bacon and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She sets the plate in front of him with the same maternal firmness she's shown since the day he arrived, but there's something different in her manner now. A settled quality, as if a question she's been carrying has finally been answered. "Eat up," she says, pouring coffee. "Catherine's waiting at the schoolhouse, said to tell you the children have something to show you." Jake's stomach clenches with sudden worry. The children know what happened last night. Course they know. This is a small town, Jake. Secrets don't keep long. Margaret sits across from him, her weathered hands wrapped around her own coffee cup, but they also know you stayed. That you chose to trust us instead of running. Through the window, Jake can see townspeople going about their morning routines, opening stores, feeding livestock, sweeping porches. Everything looks normal, but he can sense the undercurrent of change, the knowledge that something important shifted in the darkness. "Mrs. Henderson," he says carefully. "What happens now?" She smiles, the expression transforming her lined face. "Now you live, Jake. For the first time in years you just live." At the schoolhouse, Catherine stands in the doorway, wearing a blue dress that makes her eyes look like spring sky. Her smile when she sees him approaching holds none of yesterday's fear, only joy and something deeper that makes his chest tight with hope. "The children have been here since dawn," she says, taking his hand. "They wanted to do something special." Inside the schoolhouse, Jake stops short. Every desk has been decorated with wild flowers, and across the blackboard, someone has written in careful letters, "Welcome home, Mr. Sullivan." The children sit in their seats beaming at him, little Mary Patterson with flower petals in her hair, Samuel Morrison grinning with pride, the middle-aged farm children, who usually arrive covered in dust, now scrubbed clean for what they clearly consider a celebration. "We voted," announces 10-year-old Emily Chen, whose family runs the town's only restaurant. "We want you to be our official school handyman." Miss Walsh says that means you'll help us with projects and fix things and teach us about tools. Jake looks at Catherine, who nods encouragingly. The position comes with a small salary from the school board. Not much, but enough to live on if you're not planning to leave town. "I'm not planning to leave," Jake says, his voice rough with emotion. "Not ever if you'll have me." The children cheer, and Mary Patterson jumps up to throw her arms around his waist. "Does this mean you'll live here forever and ever?" "If Miss Walsh and the town council agree," Jake says, looking over the child's head to meet Catherine's eyes, "I'd like that very much." "The town council already voted," Samuel Morrison announces, "unanimous approval for your permanent residency. Pa said to tell you that good neighbors are hard to find, and nobody wants to lose one over old troubles." Jake feels tears threatening and doesn't fight them. These children, this woman, this community, they're offering him something he never dared dream of. Not just acceptance, but belonging. Not just forgiveness, but faith in who he can become. Later that afternoon, Jake and Catherine walk through town together, and people nod and smile as if nothing unusual happened the night before. At the general store, George Patterson mentions that his back porch needs reinforcing. At the church, Minister Henderson asks about building new pews for the growing congregation. Doc Whitman wonders if Jake might help construct a proper clinic building. They're not just tolerating his presence, they're weaving him into the fabric of their community, giving him work that matters, responsibilities that anchor him to this place. That evening, as they sit on the boarding house porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Catherine reaches over to take his hand. "Jake," she says quietly, "what happened in Denver? The real story." He's been dreading this moment and anticipating it in equal measure. Clayton Ross was stealing land from homesteaders, using his position on the city council to falsify documents, taking farms from families who couldn't afford lawyers to fight him. Catherine nods, encouraging him to continue. "I was working for a widow named Sarah Mitchell. Her husband died, left her with 3 children and a farm that was her whole world. Ross had forged papers saying her land claim was invalid, that the farm belonged to a development company he secretly owned. You tried to help her. I confronted him. Told him I had evidence of the forgery, that I was taking it to the territorial marshal. He laughed, said no one would believe a drifter over a city councilman. Jake's hand tightens around Catherine's, then he pulled a gun. Said I'd seen too much to walk away, and you shot him. I drew faster. I'd been practicing since I was 12. My father said a man needed to protect himself on the frontier. I didn't want to kill him, Catherine. I just wanted him to stop pointing that gun at me. Catherine is quiet for a long moment, processing the story. What happened to the widow, Sarah Mitchell? I don't know. I ran that night, figured the law would never believe my side. Left her to fight Ross's people alone. The guilt in his voice is unmistakable. I've been carrying that with me for 2 years, wondering if she lost her farm because I wasn't brave enough to stay and face trial. You were 19 alone facing a corrupt system, Catherine says gently. Running might have been the only choice that kept you alive. Maybe, but it wasn't the right choice. It brought you here, she points out. To us, to me. Maybe everything happens for a reason. They sit in comfortable silence as the first stars appear, and Jake marvels at how different this feels from every other evening of the past 2 years. No listening for approaching horses, no calculating escape routes, no loneliness so deep it felt like drowning. Catherine, he says finally, I love you. She turns to look at him, her green eyes reflecting starlight. I love you too, Jake Sullivan. All of you, past and present and whatever future we build together. Even knowing what I've done, especially knowing what you've done, and what you've chosen to do since. She leans closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You could have kept running, but you stayed. You trusted us enough to tell the truth. That takes more courage than any quick draw. 3 months later, the letter arrives on a Tuesday morning while Jake is helping Samuel Morrison with advanced mathematics and Catherine is drilling the younger children on their spelling words. Deputy Cross delivers it personally, his expression unreadable as he hands over the official envelope. News from Denver, he says simply. Thought you'd want to read it with friends around. Jake's hands shake slightly as he opens the letter, Catherine reading over his shoulder while the children watch with barely contained curiosity. The Territorial Marshal's Office has conducted a full investigation based on new testimony and evidence. Sarah Mitchell, it turns out, didn't lose her farm. She found a lawyer willing to work for a share of the land, and together they exposed Ross's entire scheme. 6 other families got their property back, and the development company was dissolved. More importantly, 3 witnesses have come forward confirming Jake's version of events. A bartender who saw Ross draw first, a hotel clerk who heard Ross threaten Jake's life, and Sarah Mitchell herself, who testified that Jake was trying to help her when the confrontation occurred. The murder charges have been dropped. Jake Sullivan is a free man. The schoolhouse erupts in cheers as Catherine reads the news aloud. The children dance around their desks, Samuel grins so wide his face might split, and even Deputy Cross allows himself a smile. Congratulations, son, Cross says, shaking Jake's hand. Justice took its time, but it got there eventually. That evening, the entire town gathers at the church for an impromptu celebration. Margaret Henderson has made her famous apple pies, the Morrison family brings fresh bread, and the Chen family provides enough Chinese dumplings to feed an army. Minister Henderson offers a prayer of thanksgiving, and Tom Morrison gives a speech about second chances and the power of community. Jake finds himself surrounded by people who've become family, genuine family in a way he never experienced growing up. Children tug at his sleeves wanting to hear about his adventures, women offer marriage advice with knowing smiles, and men discuss plans for the new clinic building and school expansion. But the moment that matters most comes when Catherine pulls him aside as the evening winds down. Jake, she says, her voice trembling with emotion, now that you're truly free, I need to ask you something. His heart stops, wondering if freedom means she expects him to leave, to see more of the world before settling down. Will you marry me? She asks, her cheeks flushing pink even in the lamplight. Jake stares at her in shock. Catherine, that's supposed to be my question. Well, you were taking too long, she says with a laugh that's half tears, and I'm a modern woman. I know what I want. Jake sweeps her into his arms, spinning her around while the remaining townspeople cheer and applaud. When he sets her down, he drops to one knee right there in the church social hall. Catherine Walsh, he says formally, will you marry me and make me the happiest man in Colorado Territory? "Yes," she says, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, yes, yes." As winter gives way to spring, wedding preparations consume the town. Catherine insists on making her own dress, and half the women in Copper Ridge contribute fabric, lace, or family heirloom accessories. Jake works with Tom Morrison and Minister Henderson to build furniture for the small house they'll share behind the schoolhouse. The children plan special wedding presents. Samuel carves wooden picture frames, Mary Patterson makes a quilt with help from her mother, and the older students compose a song about love conquering fear. Jake writes a letter to Sarah Mitchell, sending her an invitation to the wedding and asking for her forgiveness for abandoning her fight. Her response arrives 3 days before the ceremony. She'll be attending with her new husband, a lawyer who helped her not only keep her farm but expand it. She bears no grudge. Jake's confrontation with Ross exposed the corruption that led to justice for everyone involved. On the morning of the wedding, Jake stands in front of the mirror in his boarding house room, adjusting the new suit that Margaret Henderson insisted on buying him. His reflection shows a different man than the one who rode into Copper Ridge 8 months ago, calmer, more settled, with hope in his eyes instead of constant vigilance. The ceremony takes place in the church decorated with spring wildflowers, the entire community crowded into pews and standing along the walls. Catherine walks down the aisle on Tom Morrison's arm, radiant in a dress of ivory silk with her grandmother's pearls. When their eyes meet, Jake feels the last of his old fears dissolve completely. Minister Henderson performs the ceremony with obvious joy, his words about love and commitment, and choosing to build a life together, carrying extra weight for a couple who've already faced separation and uncertainty. When they exchange rings, simple gold bands crafted by the town's blacksmith, Jake's voice is steady and sure. "I promise to stay," he tells Catherine. "No more running, no more looking over my shoulder, just building something beautiful with you here for the rest of our lives." Catherine's vows bring tears to eyes throughout the congregation. "I choose you, Jake Sullivan. I choose the man you've become and the man you're still becoming. I choose the life we'll build together in this place that's made us both whole." The celebration afterward lasts until midnight, with dancing and music and enough food to feed 2 towns. Jake dances with his bride, with Margaret Henderson, with little Mary Patterson standing on his feet, with every woman who wants to welcome him officially into the community. But the moment he treasures most comes near the end of the evening, when Samuel Morrison approaches with a serious expression. "Mr. Sullivan," the young man says formally, "I want to thank you." "For what, son?" "For showing me what it means to be a man. Not the quick-draw gunfighter kind of man, the real kind, the kind who stays and fights for what matters, who chooses love over fear." Jake's throat tightens with emotion. "Samuel, you taught me just as much, about courage, about standing up for what's right even when it's scary. Will you keep teaching me, even though you're married now and might have your own family someday?" "Always," Jake promises. "Your family too, son. All of you are." As the last guests head home and Catherine changes out of her wedding dress, Jake stands on the porch of their new house looking out over the town that's become his world. The mountains stand sentinel in starlight, the creek murmurs its eternal song, and somewhere a night bird calls to its mate. He's 33 years old, and for the first time in his life, he's exactly where he belongs. Years pass in the rhythm of seasons and school terms, marked by the growth of children and the deepening of love. Jake becomes more than the school handyman. He's the man people call when storms damage roofs, when machinery breaks down, when someone needs help that requires both skill and discretion. He and Catherine have 3 children of their own: James, who inherits his father's steady hands and his mother's love of learning; Elizabeth, who charms the entire town with her bright smile and fearless spirit; and Thomas, named for Jake's lost brother, who shows early signs of being a peacemaker like Minister Henderson. Samuel Morrison grows up to become a lawyer, eventually serving as territorial representative and fighting for homesteader rights. He names his first son Jacob, after the man who taught him that courage and kindness aren't opposing forces. The town of Copper Ridge prospers, attracting families who hear about a place where second chances are real and communities take care of their own. Jake helps build the new bank, the expanded church, the proper school building with glass windows and a bell tower. And sometimes, in the evening when the work is done and the children are asleep, Jake and Catherine sit on their porch and remember the night when bounty hunters surrounded the schoolhouse and an entire community chose love over money, faith over fear. On his 50th birthday, the town throws Jake a celebration that draws people from 3 counties. The territorial governor attends, praising Copper Ridge as an example of frontier democracy at its finest. But the moment that matters most comes when little Mary Patterson, now Mary Morrison, married to Samuel and carrying her first child, presents Jake with a wooden plaque. It reads, "Jake Sullivan, teacher, builder, friend. The man who taught us that home isn't a place you find, it's a place you make." As applause fills the church social hall and Catherine's hand finds his, Jake marvels at the journey that brought him here. From a wanted fugitive sleeping rough and trusting no one, to a man surrounded by family and friends who've chosen to build something lasting together. He never drew his gun again after that day in the schoolhouse. Never had to. In Copper Ridge they found ways to settle disagreements with words and compromise, with community meetings and shared labor, with the understanding that everyone benefits when everyone belongs. The wanted posters with his face have long since faded and been forgotten, replaced by photographs in family albums and school records documenting years of service. But more than that, they've been replaced by a different kind of recognition, the daily acknowledgement of people who know that Jake Sullivan is exactly who they need him to be. The love story that began with a schoolmarm and a cowboy who wanted to stop running became something larger, a story about the power of community to transform lives, about the courage required to choose trust over suspicion, about the truth that redemption is always possible when people are willing to see beyond the past to the potential for good. Every morning when Jake wakes beside Catherine in their bed overlooking the town they've helped build, he remembers the afternoon he first decided not to run. It was the best decision he ever made, not just for himself, but for everyone whose life has been touched by the ripples of that choice. In Copper Ridge, Colorado territory, love didn't just stop a man from running. It taught an entire community that sometimes the best way to ensure your own future is to help someone else find theirs. And in a world often divided by fear and mistrust, that lesson continues to echo through generations, proving that the most powerful force for change isn't law or money or violence. It's the simple decision to see the humanity in others and act on that recognition. This is the story that gets passed down from parents to children, from teachers to students, from neighbors to newcomers, the story of how a town chose love over fear, and how that choice made all the difference in the world. Have you ever wondered what would happen if an entire community decided to protect someone they barely knew? The story of Jake Sullivan and Copper Ridge shows us that when people choose to see the good in others, when they're willing to stand together against injustice, miracles become possible. Love doesn't just change individuals, it transforms entire communities, creating ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that second chances are real, that home is something we build together, and that the courage to trust and be trusted can change everything. Because in a world that often feels divided, we need more communities like Copper Ridge, places where people choose hope over fear, where belonging matters more than background, and where love really can conquer all.